This is the School Success Podcast, a podcast for school leaders to learn from other school leaders what's working and what's not, and to get inspiration and encouragement, as well as strategies to grow school enrollment, connect with families, retain teachers, recruit teachers, and everything in between. You guys are heroes, and I cannot thank you enough for pouring into this next generation that's coming behind us. My goal is you will take at least one thing away from every episode that you can take back to your school to make it better than it is right now. Please enjoy the School Success Podcast. This podcast is brought to you by the Herzog Foundation.
Time for school.
Hey, School Success Makers. Welcome to another edition of the School Success Podcast. I'm your host, Mitchell Slater. I'm joined by a new friend that you might think is family, and I would almost just consider him family because he has the same last name as me, so go Slaters, but he's actually not related, at least that I know of, but it's Tim Slater, and he's calling in from the great country of the Dominican Republic, which we're going to dive into in just a little bit. But he is head of school of Cabrera Christian Classical Academy there, and they're doing some really cool stuff. I met him at a conference a couple years ago, and just to let you know this guy's personality, which you'll hear about in a little bit, he literally comes up to the booth where I have my booth with my company, and he goes like, "Hey, we're related. We're like brothers." And I was like, what are you talking about? I mean, he was bald, I was bald, so I was like, maybe that's what he's talking about. And then I see his last name is Slater too, so I was like, oh boy, instant best friends, and that's what became. So this is going to be a fun episode. I'm excited for you guys to hear from Tim and his story of what he's been doing to him and his wife. It's really, really cool. So I don't want to take any thunder away from him. I'll pass it off to him to introduce himself, and then we will jump into today's episode. So Tim, welcome to the podcast today.
Hey, well, thank you so much, brother, with the same last name and the same haircut and the same devastatingly good looks. But no, I do not believe we're related, but it's really been a real pleasure to get to meet you. So my name is Tim Slater, and I'm speaking to you from the Dominican Republic, where it is sunny and warm. I'm looking out my window at the ocean. It's absolutely stunningly beautiful in this country here in the Caribbean. And my job here is I'm the head of school here at Cabrera Christian Classical Academy, which is a new school. We're just finishing up our third year here in the Dominican Republic. We're a comprehensive school, so we teach kids from the ages 4 to the ages of 14. And we're an international school, so we have kids from all over the world that are here. We have students that are natural Spanish speakers, that are native English speakers, native German speakers. We have some Portuguese speakers, and all of our classes here are taught in English.
That's awesome. Well, Tim, thank you for taking time to be on the podcast today. I know we're going to have fun, and I would love, before we jump into all this stuff, is to ask you the same question that I ask everybody. And this will be, I think, a fun one for you because I've actually never been to the DR. I know you keep talking about it. I need to go. I need to come over for a visit. But I would say if I do, and when I do come over for a visit one day, what would you say, Mitchell, you need to eat this and do this to experience the DR?
Oh my gosh, Mitchell. When you come to the DR, as well as any of your listeners, the first thing you got to do is you got to eat something called mofongo. Mofongo is smashed plantains made to be savory, not sweet. So here in the Dominican Republic, they don't have potatoes per se. What you have is a banana-looking product called a plantain, which people say, "Oh, I love plantains. They're so sweet. They're a great dessert." No, they eat them here green, and just like a starch, and they serve them savory. They put cream sauce over the top. They'll put chicken over the top. They'll put shrimp over the top. They'll put conch over the top. They'll put octopus over the top. That's the food you got to have while you're here in the Dominican Republic.
Okay. And I'm guessing every restaurant has that, or you can make it homemade for me?
Every restaurant has it here. I would be happy to make it for you, but you would not want me to make it. You would want someone with a lot of Dominican experience who knows exactly how to make it with the right pan and the right spices and the right amount of love that goes into that.
Okay. Very good. All right. So I'm going to eat that. And then what am I going to do? What's something touristy you would say, Mitchell, you got to do this?
Well, Mitchell, if you're going to come to the Dominican Republic, you got to go to the beaches. I have been blessed to go to beaches all over this planet. I've been to Australia and Fiji. I've been to the Marquesas Islands. I have been to Hawaii. I've been to even the beautiful beaches of Florida. And I got to tell you, the beaches here in the Dominican Republic are stunning. They're big, they're soft, and they are empty. There is nobody here on these beaches, which makes them fantastic.
Okay, well, I'm a big beach fan, and I'm pretty picky about the beaches. So
sign me up. I discovered I'm a beach snob. I didn't realize this, but I'm a beach snob.
Okay.
I want a
Well,
clear view of the water with no umbrellas between me and the water. And I don't want to be sitting right next to the water, so I don't want to worry about the tide coming in and stealing my shoes.
okay, well, sign me up. I'm gonna come over there. I'm gonna eat some plantains that are mashed up, and then I'm gonna go to the beach with you. Sounds good to me. Awesome. Okay, well, hey Tim, to jump into today's episode, I'd love to just hear your story. Your story is like when you've told me, obviously a couple years ago, your story, and then you kind of get into more specifics a couple weeks ago when we chatted. I love your story. I love what God's been able to do in your story to be able to get to where you guys are, and I would love for you to kind of just share that first of like how you got to starting a Christian school in the
Sure.
DR, and then we'll go from there with some questions I got for you. Hey, school success makers, Mitchell here. I just want to take a really quick break from the show to give a big, huge shout out to the Herzog Foundation. I absolutely love the Herzog Foundation. I've been friends and partners with them for a couple years now, but we're bringing it to a whole new level. And I'm excited to share that our very own School Success podcast is now featured on the Herzog Foundation Podcast Network. The Herzog Foundation is a powerhouse of resources designed to support schools like yours, from free training events through the Herzog Foundation Institute to their incredible online news publication, The Lion, and of course, our new podcast, Home. They have everything you need to stay informed and inspired. And if you're dreaming of starting your own Christian school or co-op, don't miss their online course, Schoolbox. It's a fantastic resource to help you get started on the right foot. At School Success, we're proud to partner with the Herzog Foundation to bring you these valuable tools and insights. So visit herzogfoundation.com to explore all they have to offer. Trust me, you won't want to miss out on these amazing opportunities for growth and success. And I love all the people over there, and I know you guys will too. So please, please go check them out, and you won't be disappointed. Now, back to the show.
Absolutely. So the my origin story, a Batman story, if you will, about how I came to the school here in the Dominican Republic is I was spent 30 years as an astronomy professor at the university level. I was studying black holes and planets and stars and all those kinds of crazy far out things. And after 30 years of being a university professor and the way things were going with the culture wars in the United States, it just became really, really an uncomfortable place for me, particularly because I'm a man of faith. And to be able to work in a, I'm going to call it the godless environment of most public universities, became really, really difficult. So my wife and I moved to Hawaii, where I've been working. We have a lot of telescopes in Hawaii, and we built a farm there in Hawaii where we had 22 acres. We had cows, and we had sheep, and we had ducks, and we had pigs, not the big ugly pigs, little tiny cute kuni pigs. And we were just having a wonderful time living in Hawaii. And then in March of 2021, COVID hit. And when COVID hit, Hawaii, like many states in the United States, completely shut down. No inter-island travel, no way to go to the doctor, no way to get your car fixed. The only thing that was allowed to be open was Walmart. And even the state government of Hawaii gave you a credit card to spend at Walmart to be sure that you spent time in the Walmart. And we decided that was just way too restrictive for us. We weren't enjoying it. But we just built this farm and we had just set up all these education programs that we were running there in the state of Hawaii and being pretty successful at it. But something just kept telling us something's not right. You shouldn't be here. And then in two completely disconnected events, I happened to be standing in the Walmart and I was looking at avocados. And I was looking at these avocados, these little teeny tiny avocados, Hass avocados, were selling for $6 a piece. And I said, I can't believe it. $6 a piece for an avocado. That is ridiculous. I just can't believe it. In my farm, I have avocado trees. I've got avocados dropping on the ground. I can't give them away. I have so many avocados. Here I am in the store, and people are paying $6 a piece for it. And Mitchell, I kid you not, the avocado spoke to me. The avocado says, Tim, what? Am I on candid camera? Tim. So I hold the avocado up to my ear, and the avocado says to me, go to where the food is. Go to where the food is? What are you talking about? What do you mean go to where the food is? And I look on the side of that box, and it says, I kid you not, in Hawaii, these avocados were made in the Dominican Republic. So, like the divine intervention, the God speaking to me through an avocado says, go to the Dominican Republic. And you know what I said? I said, where's the Dominican Republic? I have no idea where the Dominican Republic is. I mean, like in fourth grade, we learned something about Columbus and sailing the seas of blue in 1492, something like that. I didn't know. So I cast that aside and didn't think about that again. Well, it turns out during the same time, my wife was visiting family in Tampa, Florida, just north of where you are there. And while she was in Florida, she met this really nice lady, and she and this lady were having a conversation and just talking about everything. And this lady turned out to be a retired naval officer, was very patriotic, believed a lot in the United States. And the lady said, well, Stephanie, my wife, we need to cut our conversation off short because tomorrow I'm flying to another country to have a citizenship interview. And Debbie says, what country is that? She says, well, the Dominican Republic. And Mark says, why would you go to the Dominican Republic? I mean, you're a patriot. You love the United States. What are you doing? She answered vaguely, oh, it's a pretty place. The cost of living is low. The weather is perfect. It's a lovely place. So Stephanie says that her ears started ringing and the phrase Dominican Republic, Dominican Republic, Dominican Republic kept going through her head. And she says, I wonder where the Dominican Republic is. We didn't know, right? So she comes home and I'm picking her up at the airport. She's like, hello, honey. It's nice to see you. I hope you had a nice time. And she goes, I have something terrible that I have to tell you. And I don't know how you're going to take it because we just built a house. We just got all of our farm animals. We just got our tractors working. I think, my love, we need to go to the Dominican Republic. And I said, me too. 6 weeks later, we'd sold our house, our tractors, our cows, our ducks, our pigs, our sheep, our lawnmowers, our tractors, everything we'd sold, and we were on a plane coming to the Dominican Republic. Now, I want to point out the Dominican Republic is a Spanish-speaking country, and I didn't speak a word of Spanish. I didn't know where the Dominican Republic was prior to this event. So I got online like everybody else and figured out where the Dominican Republic was. And that's how we got to the Dominican Republic. But that's where the story gets interesting. And to make a long story short, which is what people always say when they've spoken too long, is we got here to the Dominican Republic and we said, okay, God, what are we supposed to do? Why did you bring us here? Silence. Avocados were not speaking. Nobody was talking. The ocean was not talking. Silence, complete silence. So, okay, well, I guess we should, take our money that we made on our house in Hawaii. Maybe we should buy a farm here. And so we started looking for farms in Hawaii. Sorry, not in Hawaii. We've been in Hawaii. Now we're in the Dominican Republic. And a month goes by. We find nothing. 2 months goes by. Find it. 3 months goes by. We find absolutely nothing. 6 months goes by. And my wife says to the people that in our church here, says, I just got to turn this over to God. I don't know what to do. We can't find the right house. And the lady standing next to her says, oh, honey, you should buy my house. I'm getting ready to move to Africa. You should buy my house. To which we said, oh, great. Some nice little old lady who we just met. We're going to have to go look at her house. And we're going to have to tell her, no, it's not a perfect fit. But she insisted. And so we came out to the house and we walked in the door and ta-da! It was the perfect house on the perfect farm with a perfect school building. Now, we didn't know it was a school building at the time because it was just this beautiful place which had far more room than we needed. But once we got settled in here, then families started to come talk to us and say, hey, you guys know something about education. Maybe you would start a school here. Why should I start a school? There's a ton of schools in the Dominican Republic. They said, well, there's no English-speaking schools on this coast. There are no rigorous schools that use a classical education approach. And there are no Christian schools that teach kids how to be wise and virtuous and to love God. And that's what we need. And we said, boy, that sounds like a lot of work. I'm not sure I'm interested in that. And in a moment of wisdom, I said, I'll tell you what, if you can get 6 families together that want to start this adventure with us, we will start a school. Because I'm sure there's no chance they're going to find 6 families that want to do that. A week later, there were 10 families standing at my door saying, school starts next week. Let's start. And God brought us the families. God brought us the building. God brought us a school and brought us to where we are today in this wonderful, amazing, challenging task of teaching kids how to walk with God.
Man, I see, and I love this story. And you actually shared even more detail, which I hadn't heard. So I learned a lot from you just telling your story there. And so I want to say, obviously, how awesome and how thankful I am for you and your story of like following the call. I mean, I remember when you first told me the part of God told us, and we were like, all right, 6 weeks later, everything was sold and on to the next thing. Like that, I feel like you never hear that from people. They feel like they hear something and go, Well, let me think
That is
about
not
it. Pray.
me. That is
What?
not me. I'm a planner. I know what I'm going to have for dinner next Thursday night. I know where I'm going to be on June 15th. I am a planner, planner, planner. And I've never in my life had one of these, I call it Jonah and the whale experiences, where God says, you are going to go to Nineveh. And I'm like, oh, sure, God, I'm happy to do what you tell me. Where's Nineveh? I mean, it was one of these kind of adventures, and got here and didn't really know what we were supposed to do. And when the time was right, God then put it in front of us and said, okay, son, I've been planning this for you for many, many years. Now I've got a task for you to do. And every day I wake up and get to serve God. It's a fantastic, exciting event.
I love that. So the schools that are listening and school leaders that are listening, in just that part of your story, before I ask you some other questions, people are like, okay, man, how the heck did he do that? How did he, feel confident enough and take the leap of faith to do that and to go to a place he didn't know the language? Like, if you were kind of just share just any like advice on that piece, if somebody's listening going, man, I feel like maybe God's telling me to do something and I'm not sure of it. What kind of advice would you give somebody maybe struggling with that decision right now?
Well, I'm not sure I'm the right person to give advice, but what I hear over and over again as I started to do research on how do you start a school and how do you start a Christian school is they said, God will make this, if this is meant to be, God will make it easy for you. Everyone I hear online says that. And that's exactly what happened in my life. I was like, okay, we'll start a school. So I said, I'd better go down and see the superintendent of schools, who said, oh, that's fantastic. We need more English speaking schools here. I went to local leaders. I went to the mayor's office, said, we're thinking about starting a school. And he goes, we would be so supportive of that. We need more and more. There are more kids here that need a rock solid education. It really got to the point where anyone I tried to find that would give me an excuse not to start the school wouldn't give it to me. It just became really, really easy. And so then where the leap of faith came in, I said, okay, well, God, I don't know what to say. God, I don't know what the school should look like. I need the inspiration. I need you to tell me what it looks like. And he didn't tell me, but he gave me all the right words to say at exactly the right time. Um, and, what should the curriculum look like? I don't know. I went and looked at a bunch of other schools, and God said, well, this is a particular curriculum that I think is a good match for you, and it's something that you can do. I didn't know what I was doing when I started this thing out. I learned every day. But I was willing to be stupid about it and willing to say, I just don't know. And the resources are out there, and you just got to find the right people to talk to and the right questions to ask and have the courage to make it happen. So if you're on the fence about whether or not you should start a school, and your kids need something different, the children in your neighborhood need something different, what I can tell you is God will put the tools in your hands to make it happen if you have the courage to take the first step. And for me, it was really all about courage.
And your background obviously is not this. Like, I mean, you were a professor, obviously, so you're in the education space, but like you take somebody who's traditionally a traditionally trained scientist and now pushing you into like God's world of like doing education and moving you. Like what does that look like? Because maybe somebody's listening and they feel like they're not cut out for education, or they're struggling right now with their calling of that. Like, what, how did, God took you and kind of said, here you go, Tim, this is what you're going to be doing now. Would love to just kind of hear any advice you have on that piece as well.
Sure. So I want to tell you about this from two different directions. So let me first talk about this as not necessarily being a skilled teacher. And that is, there is so much that goes into building a school and running a school that has nothing to do with being in front of kids in the classroom. There's accounting and fundraising. There's facilities. I've got to, someone's got to drive the bus. Someone's got to fix the plumbing when a kid puts too much stuff down in the toilet. Someone's got to be sure that lunches are prepared and that the lawn is mowed and that the electricity is on. The books somehow get from the United States to here. There's many, many things that need to be done that have to do with that is required for the infrastructure of a school that have nothing to do with standing in front of kids and telling you what you know. So if you're feeling you may not have the educational skill set to be able to pull that, or the personality to pull it off, doesn't matter. God will bring the people that can do that for you. But building the infrastructure has to be done. And people that are really talented teachers are so interested in kids and so interested in the subject, they may not have the temperament or the time to think about where's the right building and how do I get a school bus and how do I figure out the accounting piece of this and how do I recruit students. So on one hand, you don't need to be an expert teacher to do this. You just got to love God. You got to love kids and want kids to get a closer relationship to God. Now, the other way to think about that question is I spent 30 years as a traditional scientist. And in the circles I walked in, which was in astronomy, there were a few Christians, but not many Christians. Astronomy is, by and large, a godless science. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I don't buy into any of the crazy ideas that scientists are in the business of trying to put God out of business or trying to disprove God. I didn't meet those people. But the idea that you might put your faith in something bigger than computers and numbers and things you can see through a telescope or even a microscope is pretty rare. Um, so for me, working in the science field as a Christian, I was pretty quiet about my faith. Um, and in particular, I had a number of things happen to me, good and bad, as being a university professor. But one of the things that was most telling was when bad things were happening, I didn't get a grant that I needed to get, or didn't have telescope time that I needed to have, um, that it turned out that when things would go bad, my friends pretty much stayed with me. So it's okay, Tim, you're going to be everything's going to be just fine. But when I accidentally released the idea that I was a Christian and I believed in God and I loved Jesus Christ, He's the Savior of my life, that's when I actually started to lose colleagues and peers. So I had been wise to keep my religious views to myself in that world, because it's very, for a community of people that think they talk about free ideas and think about tolerance. There was not a lot of tolerance, and there was not a lot of certainly not a tolerance for a Christian viewpoint. So I had to keep a lot of that part of me inside. So what I'm really excited about what I'm doing now is I get to talk about my faith. I get to talk about my personal walk with God, which has been a roller coaster, and talk about how to become closer to God. And it's worked out so much better working in this sphere than it ever did in the scientific sphere.
Hey, I just want to take a really quick break from the podcast to highlight one of our amazing partners and sponsors, ClassReach. If you're a new school administrator or founder and are struggling to keep up with all the hassles of planting a new school, like collecting tuition, communicating with parents, or handling student data, then you need ClassReach. ClassReach is the all-in-one software that helps with everything from admissions and tuition to classroom management and parent communications. Sign up for a free consultation with one of their school specialists and see how ClassReach can help your school grow today. You guys can check them out online, classreach.com. They are a kingdom-minded company, and I love their leadership team there. I've become friends with a lot of them. They truly are a great company. I support them, and I love them, and you guys will love them too. Check them out at classreach.com. Now, back to the show. I love it. I love it. Well, obviously, with all this, you got kind of just dumped into education, and here you go, you're starting a school. And I'm sure with all of that, you guys have some challenges in all of that, of course. Like, what are some of the challenges you guys are up against right now, and how are you kind of working through those?
So one of the first challenges that we run into, which anyone who's starting a new school is going to run into the challenge of, is the notion that the larger you are, the more easy things are financially. These things scale, right? Because if you're buying one set of books, that one set of books, whether you have one kid looking at it or having 10 kids look at it or having 20 kids look at it, it's much cheaper to have 20 kids looking at it, splitting the cost of that book. So growing enrollment is really, really important to us from a financial point of view. So that was one of the huge challenges. How do we grow enrollment and do it in a controlled way? Because if you grow too fast, you don't have the staff and the infrastructure to pull it off. But if you grow too slow, then you don't have the financial resources you need to make it work. So one of the things that we really struggled with was, how do you make the size of the school just right? And how do you grow with the number of teachers? And how do you grow with the building size? How do you, with these sorts of things? So that's one of the first things that most people starting school have to worry about, is what's the right number of kids for the space you have and for the financial resources that you have. The second thing that some person starting out a new school has to worry about is, what in the world are you going to teach? What's going to be, in astronomy, you study the entire universe, right? There's a lot of topics when it talks about the universe, and how do you constrain that down? And if you look at a lot of the documents in the United States education system, the Common Core, National Science Education Standards, these sorts of things, they really are incredibly vague and incredibly broad, and don't provide a lot of access. So you really just have to make decisions, make some real strong decisions about, I'm going to teach this, and I'm not going to teach that because I don't have time to teach everything. And so having one person on your team, in this case, my wife, one person on your team that can see the entire K-12 experience and understands how what you're doing when you're 6 years old impacts what you're doing when you're 8 years old, which impacts what you're doing when you're 16 years old. So you've got to have somebody that has the comprehensive view. and that's a gift from God. I certainly don't have it, but my wife does. And so having someone on your team that can see the entire student experience is really important. And then the last problem that I had was finding friends that were doing similar sorts of things, because uh, the number of private schools in the United States is huge and growing very, very quickly. But there's not a lot of systems for these people to communicate together. But there are a couple of national and international associations where people get together once a year and talk about what are they doing in their schools. They're not saying you have to do it this way, but they're saying, here's how we solve this problem. And maybe it'll work for you, maybe it won't, maybe you can tweak it around. And that's in fact how you and I met, Mitchell, was at the American Association of Classical Schools. Did I get that right? ACCS.
Yeah. Association of Classical Christian Schools. Yeah.
Boy, the president there, if he hears, is going to kill me for not getting that right. But that's been an incredibly important organization, and there are other organizations as well that support Christian schools. Big conferences to have 1,000 people, and small conferences like the one in Arkansas that only has just a few hundred people. But finding people you can connect to, because they'll tell you, hey, this book was great, this book was sucked, this book was expensive, this book was target on. And so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Other people who are much smarter than me have done this. And the trick is to find those people, connect with them, and use what they've done instead of trying to invent everything yourself. Those are the big three.
Okay. And you had mentioned when we first chatted too, just how you kind of got thrust into this part of like, you need to try and learn donor development. How do you get donors for a school? And you're in the DR when you might need donors from the States, and how do you pay your teachers? And there's all these things that you kind of had to navigate that I know you share with me. I would love to hear kind of like how you guys are navigating donor development, but also being able to pay your staff. So you have a really unique model that you guys use for that.
So donor development and fundraising is something that is very, very foreign to me in this realm. Now, when I was an astronomer, I constantly had to go out to the university and get grants and contracts and that sort of thing. So I had a lot of experience in grant writing. But it turns out schools don't run on grants. Schools run on other people. Either people power, in terms of people that are willing to be volunteers and come in and teach, or people that are willing to teach at a relatively low salary. So people power, and then donor power. So there's not a culture of philanthropy here in the Dominican Republic. So all of our external funding comes through our partners in the United States, which are either churches that contribute to the running of our school, either by buying us books or buying us a bus, helping pay some of the standard bills, or individual donors who say, hey, what you're doing is really important. There need to be more ways that we can bring bright kids closer to God and help families raise their kids in a Bible-centered manner. And so donors are really, really important for us. So for most Christian schools in the United States, the rule is you need about your funding formula. 20% comes from donors and 80% comes from your student population from tuition and fees. Here in the Dominican Republic, that just doesn't work for us. We're about the opposite. We run on about 20% tuition and fees for students and 80% on the sacrificial giving of about 100 donors in the United States, which we got one at a time, one handshake at a time, one person at a time. In fact, I would say of our 100 donors, I know 95 of them personally, either from previous life or more recently that I've met. And so taking time to make those personal relationships really matters, because we have to bring the money from the United States, our tuition in our school is $200 a month. And so many of your private school principals that are listening to this are saying, $200 a month? I pay $200 a month for t-shirts to get my kid to go to public school. But $200 a month in the Dominican Republic is a lot of money. It's a third to a half of a typical salary of a Dominican. So most of our Dominican kids have to have a patron in the United States that supports them and provides for their expenses to make school work.
Man. So you got fundraising and then teachers. What about your teachers?
Most of our teachers, about 3/4 of our teachers are actually from the United States. They come here as missionaries. Their church sends them, or they raise their own funds to come spend 4 months, 6 months, or a year serving as a volunteer missionary teacher here. And to do that, they've got to raise money or use their own savings to do that. We encourage our visiting teachers to raise about $15,000 for a year, and that would cover their airfare back and forth twice, so they could go home for Christmas, and all of their living expenses, about $1,000 a month on the order, $800 to $1,000 a month for living expenses while they're here in the Dominican Republic. So most of our teachers come from that way. We do have several local Dominicans that serve on our staff, the people that we've met that love God, that speak English, that love children, who work here and work at our school, and we pay them a Dominican wage to work at our school. So between the volunteer missionaries, between the donors we have in the U.S. and the few Dominican teachers that we have, we've got a magic formula that seems to be working really, really well.
That's awesome. Well, I love what you guys have created. I love what you guys have been able to build with God's grace and all the things He's doing to help you guys start that. Is if you, for all the school leaders that are listening, just kind of like wrap up today's episode. What if you were to share? I know all of this has been advice, but if you were to share one more piece of advice for the school leaders listening, what would you want to tell them on today's?
Okay, well, that's a great question, because as I think really hard about this, because you told me you were going to ask me this question, so I prepped for it. And I tried to come up with a bunch of different answers and always came back to the same one. And that is doing time management from a time blocking strategy. What's time blocking? What time blocking is, it says on your calendar from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m., I'm going to work on this one thing. I'm not going to let parents distract me. I'm going to let kids distract me. I'm not going to let plumbing distract me. From this time to this time, I'm going to work on this one thing, and make an appointment with yourself and don't blow it. And so what do you put in that time blocking thing? Things that do not have a deadline. Because things that have a deadline, well, those are urgent things. They got to be done. But you need to be doing important things that there's no due date for. Creating your next advertising campaign to get more students in, to creating your next event, to have parents spending more time on campus and getting to know the teachers that work with their students, figuring out time to how you're going to interact with the local congregation in domestic congregations, so that you can figure out how to get some more funds flowing your direction. So it's doing things that are really, really important that don't have a deadline. You've got to schedule those things in, or the school system doesn't work if you're a school leader.
I love that. Make some time for yourself. Work on those things that you just never end up doing because you get flooded by all the other things that flood your calendar. So great advice. And Tim, I just want to personally thank you. I love what you guys are doing, and I will one day, we'll make it over there. It's in the recording now. I'll make it over there. I'm going to visit you guys. I'm going to check out Cabrera. I'm going to see the school and check out the good old Dominican Republic. So I will see you one day over there. But obviously, thank you for your 3 years in education there, and for following God's calling on y'all's life to make disciples of all nations over there. And looking forward to the next time we get to see each other.
That would be great. And, we always welcome visitors here who want to see how an international school is put together. The more, many hands make light work, and we're always looking for visitors to come see us. And hopefully you and your family and your children can come play on the beaches, and we can sit down and talk about how to bring God to a wider group of people.
Amen. Well, another huge shout out and a thank you to Tim for taking time and being on the podcast today. I love that guy. Love his last name. Slater just has a great ring to it. And I love what he's doing there in the Dominican Republic. I'm wishing him and his family and his school nothing but the best as they continue to grow and educate the next generation that's coming behind us. And as always, I'm hoping you guys were able to take at least one thing from today's episode that you can take back to your school or yourself to make you or your school better than you are right now. And there are a few things from here. Maybe it's something that you feel like you're supposed to do, make this leap of faith and go do something else, or do something specifically different in your school. I'm hoping you guys were able to get encouraged from today's episode as much as I was. But before you guys go for today, I want to make sure you are aware of our 3 free resources here at School Success. And the first one is, of course, what you're listening to right now is our podcast, with episodes dropping every Monday morning. So please make sure you're subscribed and you are ready to get those every single Monday morning. We try and keep them around the 30 to 40 minute range, usually when we have our sponsors and partners that we shout out in those episodes. So kind of set that time aside. If you listen on 1.5 speed, it goes even faster, usually under 30 minutes, because I'm usually a 1.5 speed podcast listener. So I want to make sure you're subscribed. And if you're loving the content, I know I mention this every week, but we really would love a 5-star review from you if you're loving our content that we're putting out here. And that would mean the world to us. The second thing is on our website, schoolsuccessmakers.com. In the top right-hand corner, there's a button called the School Success Report. We send that directly to your inbox every single week with different teacher shout outs, some articles our teams have put together to help make you, the educator, more and more successful. We want to make sure that you're not missing out on those. So be subscribed to that. And last but not least, on our Facebook group page, School Success Makers, it's a private community just for school leaders. And we would love for you to be a part of it. I'm personally in there, and I would love to see you in there as well. Community is a big piece of all of this. We want to make sure you guys don't feel alone in this thing called education and the different teachers and school leaders in your life. So please join our Facebook group as well. And I think that's all I got for you guys today. So we will be back here next week with another awesome guest as usual on the School Success Podcast. We'll see you then. The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of the Herzog Foundation.